I have made it a habit of mine to catch as many game reveal presentations as I can. The Game Awards, PlayStation showcases, Nintendo Directs, obviously. Because I love to see games get revealed. I love to see the buzz and the aftermath of the announcements too. Before you ask, yes, I was the same kid who was always excited every Christmas no matter what. I just get excited about the possibility of things that are promised. And when I see a game that looks like something I'm specifically into, I hyperfixate and want that shit injected directly into my veins. When I saw the Clair Obscur Expedition 33 reveal at the 2024 Xbox Games Showcase, I knew we were looking at something special. I've gone into it before, and I'm sure I'll go into it more during my ongoing Dragon Quest retrospective that I started last time, but I have recently become engrossed with the JRPG genre. Specifically, I have watched 2 separate retrospectives on the Final Fantasy series multiple times each at this point. Love these videos to death, but I feel to an extent that I've experienced these games already. I've kind of ruined the surprises for myself, so it'd be hard for me to go back to the games and play them with a completely blind point of view. I was sure to jump on Final Fantasy 16 when it released, and you can learn more about my time with 16 thanks to the card up top. I had a good time with it, but I'm more curious than ever to experience a turn-based Final Fantasy now. And when Expedition 33 was revealed, I had the same reaction that everyone else did. Holy shit, this is the game that we would have gotten if Final Fantasy had stuck with the turn-based battle system. It looks absolutely incredible. As the months went on, we learned more about the game through the other trailers and Xbox showcases. It was going to feature an all-star cast featuring Charlie Cox, Andy Serkis, Ben Starr, Jennifer English, and it was also claiming to be a traditional RPG experience with a world map and post-game content that will encourage you to continue your adventure after the credits roll. I have been waiting for this. I wasn't given a review code, which is why this is so far behind the curve of the other reviews. Well, that and I did a decent bit of the post-game content. From checking out the other reviews though, it looks like I didn't need to add my praise to this conversation. Expedition 33 is currently the highest rated game Metacritic has hosted this year, which is pretty insane when you consider the games that we've already gotten. It even has a higher user review score than Baldur's Gate 3. That is based on far fewer reviews overall than BG3, but that's an incredible accomplishment either way. I'm not a unique case because I love this game. It had me hooked very early on, and now I get to tell all of you about my experience. But if you're gonna watch through this video, I do tell you to be wary of spoilers. I'm going to be talking about all of it. Story, combat, late game, the whole thing. But if everything is ready and you're all good, let's get started. The Gommage is starting soon. This is Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is set in a world in which every single year a big old paintress paints a big old number on a big old monolith, and anyone who is above that age dies in something called the Gommage. And every single year an expedition sets out in order to take down the paintress so that she can never paint death again.
That was so good.
I know, because also I
Did you practice that?
No, I mean, did you think I practiced the big old paintress bit?
That might be a bit of a goofier take on the events that take place, but Mr. Handsome Star is right on the money, and our main protagonist can attest to this. Gustav, played by Charlie Cox, is looking pretty down as he prepares for the Gommage. He's comforted by his adoptive daughter, Maëlle, played by Jennifer English. On his way to the dock, he runs into his estranged girlfriend, Sophie. The two catch up for a bit, with there obviously being so much of their past relationship left up in the air. Gustav in particular seems to have so much to tell Sophie, but simply can't. But eventually the two make their way to the dock as the sunset draws near. The entire city looks to the horizon, watching as the malevolent paintress strokes a new number. In an instant, everyone who is 33 years of age and above simply fades away, ceasing to exist, leaving homes broken, children orphaned, and Gustav with so much unsaid. Why would these people let this happen? Well, it's not for lack of trying. Enter the Expedition Force. For many years, Lumiere has been training soldiers in an attempt to put an end to the paintress once and for all. These squads are called expeditions, and one leaves every year in a futile attempt to stop the sacrifice. Gustav and his expedition are prepared to make this one the last. Young men and women who are of fighting age are allowed to take the responsibility as well.
Look, I know we've been over this, but as your guardian, I need to say this one more time. The rest of us only have a year left, but you've got 9 good years before your Gommage.
1 year out there is better than 9 years in here.
Gustav doesn't love that idea, but Maëlle has made her choice and wants to fight to give this world a brighter future. After the festivities, Expedition 33 leaves for the Paintress's world and touches down prepared for anything.
You're old. How did you survive the Gommage? Which expedition are you from?
I take that back. They were not prepared for a human man who is clearly over the age of the recent Gommage absolutely bodying their entire expedition. In the chaos, Gustav loses sight of everyone, including Maëlle. Alone and afraid, all Gustav can do is continue on. Real quick, can I just gush about this game's visuals and setting? I've never seen a game that's so proudly French before. I'm not going to pretend like I get all the references or homage to the French culture because, regrettably, I'm from the world's punchline as of 2025. The only thing that I can truly say I know about the French is they fries be hittin'. Aside from that, I know a pretty game when I see one, and Expedition 33 has some of the most gorgeous landscapes I've seen in a while. The sweeping vistas you're treated to on a regular basis are crafted like paintings. The use of these worn primary colors like pinks, oranges, and blues give the game so much appeal, and that's not to say anything of the environments themselves. The underwater city is an inspired location where logic leaves, but who cares when there are fish swimming above you as you walk around this broken city? The carousel captures the look of a joyous attraction not only frozen in time, but literally frozen now. The forgotten battlefield with its scattered expeditioner bodies all over the ground, it's such a careless waste of life. And who is framed in the center of the sky as you look up? The one who's responsible for everything. The framing of all these locations are worthy of study. I could continue to point out the ways in which this game relentlessly wows the player with eye candy, but I would literally have to tell you about every location. For as much as you can't take away from the art direction on display, I'm going to be one of those snobs who wasn't in love with the game's default graphical options. At its default, the game doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't agree with the intense sharpening the game uses. Plus, I will never understand the game industry's fascination with limiting cutscenes specifically to 30 frames per second. On consoles, if the game can't consistently reach 60, that's one thing. I understand those limits have to be placed, but the game is being released on PC, where machines can easily clear those benchmarks. My vote will always be to at least give the players the option. Thus, I was a sicko and downloaded Lyle's Clair Obscur fix mod. This introduces a ton of graphical options that, in my opinion, should have been there when the game launched. Using it, I was able to adjust the sharpening, making the highlights less sharp, and as well as removing the 30 FPS cap on cutscenes. I also downloaded and manually replaced the outdated version of DLSS that the game launched with. It's not much, but if there's a way to optimize the game experience and it doesn't butcher the creative vision of the team, I don't think it should be so out of reach for the average player. That whole not butchering the team's vision thing is a warning if you decide to use this mod though. I would recommend keeping the cinematic black bars enabled because they do pull some creative stuff with those black bars. And if my best friend Nick is anything to go by, the average Joe doesn't give a shit about any of this, so the whole thing is likely me being a nitpicky bitch. Anyway, it's no exaggeration to say that Gustav is going through it, given the events of the day. Before he reaches arguably his lowest point in the playthrough, Lune, another member of the expedition, shows up. Together, they group up and track down Maëlle to an unusual location that is somehow vaulted away in space-time. She's being watched over by this faceless being, the Curator. This thing has apparently been training and taking care of Maëlle. This and a few other encounters lead the group to subtly reflect on everything they thought they knew about the Nevrons. The sometimes hostile, sometimes not creatures they encounter. Maybe they're not so bad, maybe they're simply protecting their home.
Is that a Gestrel?
This little guy is not a Nevron, he's a Gestrel, a race of immature, hot-headed, and honestly dumb wooden doll people. They're obviously spiritual in nature and mention several times that they're able to be killed, but they're then reincarnated through something called the River of Life. I love the gestrels though. I spent a solid hour wandering around the village and just chatting with every single one that I could. Most of them are good for a chuckle, like the couple who are tucked away and giving each other the cold shoulder for some reason. And then there are also those who are just trying to pick a fight with the expedition, and especially each other. I never got sick of these little guys. The chief of the village promises to help them find a boat if they can fight in their tournament and face their new champion, who turns out to be another member of the expedition, CL. The chief points the quartet in the direction of Esquier, and please let me indulge myself really quick, because the entire opening Esquier cutscene is absolutely gold. First, you've got CL greeting Esquier when he flies in for the first time.
Bonjour, mes amis.
Hey, bonjour mon ami. CL?
What? I don't know. He seems nice.
Then, in order to get his help, the group has to retrieve a special rock.
But Flory was stolen by my art nemesis, one whose every step shakes the foundation of the world, the one known as Francois.
Okay.
Let me guess. Francois is located deep in Nevron-infested territory, right?
Oh no, he's right next door, over there.
Oh,
Francois is my neighbor.
okay. Well, I guess we could take a look.
Francois, by the way, also had me giggling like Flapjack during his entire screen time.
It's just a talking rock.
Wait, I thought Flory was the rock.
A rock? I am not a rock. Do you have rocks for eyes? You certainly have rocks for brains. I am clearly a turtle. Esquier! Stop sending hooligans over here!
Stop being a meanie. They're nice humans.
Then keep them on your side of the caves! Now get off my lawn!
It's okay. We'll leave. We're just here for Flory.
So, not only are you intruding, you're here to steal? Oh my word! Humans! Well, over my dead body! Rah!
And the cherry on top. It's a small thing, but it's how the group looks at each other after Francois challenges them to a fight and they all reluctantly pull out their weapons. I love that. But anyway, after that, Francois lives up to his name as arch nemesis and reveals that Esquier's precious rock has been hidden behind a waterfall. It takes some time to get there, but the group eventually finds the rock after taking down a tough Nevron. Lune and CL jump off the cliff and onto Esquier below, with Maëlle and Gustave throwing rocks, sharing one last moment before heading to the painter. After making a last stand to save Maëlle, Gustave is killed. The white-haired man makes his way toward our traumatized heroine, who is clearly immobilized, inching even closer to kill her too.
You chose to walk away. You don't get to come back now and interfere.
This unknown guy seems to have an established rapport with the terrifying old murderer, but for now, Maëlle escaped onto Esquier. The loss of Gustave is incredibly heartbreaking, but I can't say that I didn't expect something to happen. There are several small things that point to Gustave not being our main character. Sure, we have a big-name Hollywood actor playing the character, so that's what threw me off the trail long enough for his death to hit me in the gut. But then I see how much the story is focusing on Maëlle. She's having these dreams featuring the white-haired man, some even featuring the man who saved her, Verso. Maëlle is clearly getting more focused than Gustave, and not to mention Gustave's skill tree. Most of these skills are locked. By this point, I had figured Gustave was going to receive some kind of power-up that would unlock the rest of his skill tree. But then, he went and got murdered, and suddenly it all makes sense. This is Verso, by the way. I sped past his introduction because the game kinda does too. After leaving the cliffside, the game sends you to camp so the ladies and Esquier can unpack what just happened. Shortly after that, Verso shows up, introduces himself, and explains what the deal is.
I don't know exactly, but some of us stopped aging, and we're not affected by the gamage.
Some of you. Like the man on the cliff.
Anwar, Our commander.
Again, with my expectations of the story, I thought they would have held Verso's mystery a little longer. The trailers and promotional material made sure to keep his identity a secret, never giving an inch on who this guy really is. I just expected him to give a little pushback to the party, be an anti-hero at least, only to come to the party's rescue in the time of need. Which happened, I just wasn't prepared for Verso to be such a sweetheart off rip. He brings Gustav's prosthetic arm back to the party and then immediately asks if he can join their group in an effort to put the paintress down. They all accept after each member has a powwow with Verso and they all get to know each other a little bit. I should clarify that I don't have a problem with this at all, I was just expecting something different. After gathering themselves and burying Gustav, the party head for the paintress's heart, which is the only way to truly kill her apparently.
You can't just stroll up to the paintress. The chroma there is far too dense. It erases anyone who gets close.
They do have a quick stop in the mountains to recruit one of Verso's good friends, Minoko.
This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot. Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
Minoko is a gestural if you didn't catch that, so the prospect of fighting is enough to get him to join. Verso claims that the way to the heart is within Old Lumiere. Unfortunately, he left out the small detail of this being where Renoir is hiding. He kicks them out after revealing that Verso is his son, and the little white-haired girl who's been appearing to Renoir so often is Alicia, Verso's younger sister. But they get locked out of the family's manor, which is where the heart is located. The team regroups and they decide that they will have to forge a weapon to get past the paintress's chroma barrier. To do this, they will need to take down 2 of the 3 axons. These are supposedly god-level Nevron that have materials which can make a weapon strong enough to pierce said barrier.
But I'm telling you, listen to me, please. Our chances of taking them down without you lot dying are close to 0.
Close, but not 0. Death is coming either way.
That fear is unfounded because the group takes them both down pretty easily. After this, the curator takes the materials, specifically from Mael,
That's suspicious.
and creates a weapon to get them in. After this, it's pretty much a straight shot up to the paintress. They have a chat with Renoir, which ends to him getting gommaged by Mael and, again, the curator for some reason.
That's weird.
But then, the group confronts the paintress and defeats her. Yeah, they save the day and make it all the way back to Lumiere to deliver the good news. The expeditions are over. Everyone can now wonder about the lives that they'll get to live now. Everyone except Verso. He sits down at the harbor and reads a note left to him by his sister. So, alright, let's talk about what's really going on here. The world of Lumiere is actually nothing more than a painting created by a member of the Descendre family. A family full of basically magical artists. The artist responsible? His name is Verso. Tragedy struck this family when a fire erupted in the manor where they live. This fire disfigured and muted the daughter Alicia and killed her older brother Verso. Yes, the real Verso has been dead. He sacrificed his own life to save his sister's. The Verso we've known throughout the game is a representation of what his mother remembers Verso to be, complete with his memories and personality intact. In the process of grieving the loss of her son, the mother, Aileen, began painting on her son's canvas. She painted to escape the pain of loss, losing herself in the process, abandoning her family to live in this world, to be away from the hardships of her current reality. It's pretty relatable, if obviously self-destructive. The father, Renoir, in an attempt to pull the mother back to reality, entered the painting as well. We know him as the curator, the real Renoir. The Renoir that met Expedition 33 at the beach was a painted version of Renoir created by Aileen. The Alicia that accompanies this painted Renoir is also a creation of Aileen's. Another snapshot of how she views her now helpless daughter.
Alicia? Good, you're awake. Come downstairs.
The oldest of this family's children, Clea, is attempting to pull their mother from the canvas from the outside.
It's just a matter of time.
As she weakens, Renoir is able to erase her oldest creations, with the exception of her obscene fake family. She's made them immortal, but luckily, they're also quite useless.
As Alicia was entering the canvas to help her father and Clea, her mother found her and repainted her. Not as Alicia, but as Mael, forcing her to live an entire life without knowing the one that she's left behind. Until now, anyway. These two copies of siblings, neither truly who they appear to be, reconvene. They meet up with the real Renoir now, apologizing to this version of his son that was given life as a part of Aileen's grieving process. Especially now that Aileen is back home, Verso's canvas can be destroyed for good.
Once we erase the canvas, we won't have to worry anymore.
But she's home now. Why?
You know your mother. Verso painted this canvas. It contains a piece of his soul. She'll never willingly part with it.
No.
Renoir commands that Alicia come home with him, even if destroying this canvas means destroying the last piece of Verso the Desandre family has. Renoir begins the destruction of the canvas immediately as Verso fades away. But Mael, now fully awakened as a paintress, stops him from gommaging. The two escape as Esquier and Monoko swoop in. Back at camp, Mael repaints Lune and Ciel. Everyone regroups, kinda dunks on Verso a little bit, but then come up with a plan to use all the chroma left in the dead expeditioners' bodies to create an army large enough to take on Renoir. Everyone meets on the Lumiere harbor. Mael summons the army and the battle for the canvas begins.
Tomorrow comes.
It was a really cool set piece, just to put that out there. There aren't too many extra paths to explore in this last dungeon, but being able to go down the path that you started the game at was pretty special. This game does a great job of bringing a large experience like this full circle and making it feel complete. Expedition 33 confronts Renoir one last time, pushing back on this man who wishes so badly for his family's safety. The party is giving him a good fight, but it's not enough until the unexpected assistance from the paintress herself gives them the edge to win. Mael begs Renoir to see it her way, to understand why—
Do you know why I cannot leave her or you behind? This is what I see every day.
Renoir explains that his wife's suffering, the toll that Verso's death has taken on her, is too much to bear. The father and daughter reconcile, with him leaving the canvas. But Verso takes this chance to jump into a liminal space within the canvas, confirming that these young boys who we've all seen around the game world are actually painted versions of young Verso. A boy who is sick of painting, sick of his parents choosing what his creative outlet should be, and all he wants now is to be put to rest. Mael and Verso argue in this space on whether or not Mael should return to the real world or live here with Verso for another eternity, which Verso has already done once and would rather not do again.
It's time to stop painting.
The two siblings, both with their own desires, battled to decide their fate. The player is given a choice to see two different fates here, and I want to talk about both of them, but first I think we need to do a little cleanup. Let's talk about these people. Gustave as a character, to me anyway, really doesn't matter when I look back at everything. It was an interesting bait and switch to have the focus of the narrative swap to someone else and essentially leave this guy as a player stand-in who fizzles out and basically just acts as an initial motivation for the real protagonist. For what it's worth, I really liked Gustave for as long as we got to spend with him. I connected with him and I fell for him genuinely. When he had to watch his on-again, off-again girlfriend disappear forever, that hurt. And that, compounded with the loss of his friends and his squad, nearly pushes him to the brink of giving up on all of it. When he finds Mael, he's constantly trying to get her to hang back and stay safe so she can live out the rest of her life. These two have some really cute moments together.
Well, the paperwork probably says we're dead too, so...
Yeah, probably. Ooh, nice one.
I know.
I told you, don't get cocky. It was okay.
You taught me great. Nah.
Ultimately, Gustav is a character that I'm unsure of how much we needed as a character. If he was just a rug to pull out from underneath us, then it worked, but I think it would have been more impactful if this guy had mattered more in the grand scheme of things. It feels like Verso pretty effectively takes over any role Gustav started. I mean, we couldn't even begin building relationship levels with other characters until Verso becomes the main guy in the party. If we zoom out and take a look at Gustav through the lens of the whole adventure, my rationalization is that he's another caricature of Alicia's version of her brother. Before the painted version of Verso, there was Gustav. Which makes sense, but it also gets a little muddy when realizing that painted Verso already existed. Didn't hate the character, I just needed a little more clarification. Lune is alright. I appreciated her quirks, but as the story went along, I think she was the character that I was the least compelled by. She's the analytical science nerd that wants to make sure they're doing everything by the books. She has several good moments throughout the story, but none that really had an impact on me. Nothing that stood out in any way. Learning that her parents essentially had her so they could have an apprentice at a very young age could have been a little concerning, but Lune, in the beginning at least, never sounds like she has any bitter feeling towards her parents. In fact, she asks Verso if he's encountered their expedition, so towards the end of the game he takes her to the last place that he remembers seeing them. They find the journal of Expedition 46 here, but it merely puts the weight of her parents' success as expeditioners on Lune.
Even her last words were still, "Finish our work."
It also shows how much faith she had in you.
That's one way to look at it.
And the other way?
My only value to them. Not as a daughter, but as a backup plan. For their legacy.
This is where we really see that Lune's relationship with her parents wasn't as loving or as two-sided as it needed to be. Sure, Lune got her inquiring nature from her parents' commitment to their job and essentially raising Lune in that world, but it's sad wondering what kind of person Lune would have become if her parents had just been a little more concerned with their daughter and the remaining time they had with her, not trying to buy her time with the defeat of the Paintress, since it's not likely to exist in the first place. Monoko is probably the least layered character in the main party, but he is by far the most entertaining. He's just always so much fun to be around. He does have a few emotional moments like when Renoir kills Noko, and it is sad. It gives Monoko a side quest to do in Act 3 where he and Verso take Noko to the sacred Gestrel River where Gestrels are reincarnated. But this all felt more like a vessel to teach the audience more about Gestrel culture and how they exist. Monoko never had any moments of wholesome father-son bonding with Noko. It was all stuff like this.
No distractions, son. I'm really busy beating up strangers.
Again, I'm totally fine with the funny stuff. It's what I prefer from Monoko. I was always more interested in Monoko's moments of being a lovable dipshit.
Why the hell did you...
Sorry, I f***ed up. I just wanted to show off.
Right. Okay, Monoko. Stop crying. We have to move.
Even more so when he and Verso are having their bro moments. These are the moments that I truly love. Verso's best friend being his anchor. He and Esquier are both creations of the real Verso, the BFFs he created for himself, two people he can really confide in.
Now come over here and let's snuggle.
Little spoon.
Obviously.
This is what we mean when we say healthy masculinity, people. We've got CL. CL. CL has a much more interesting background to me. When they find her in the Gestrel village, I wasn't immediately interested, but as we learn more about her, I start to realize how much she's hiding. She's very motherly towards Mael, very caring, and just generally kind to everyone in the group, which is the main reason I think CL is hot as hell, bro. After some digging, you find out that she was once married, but her husband was taken away sooner than expected. Not because of the gommage, but because of a terrible accident. It's part of the reason I found Verso and CL's dynamic so compelling to watch. It gets to the point where CL and Verso become more than friends, but after they take down the Paintress and Verso allows everyone to gommage that they lose their trust in him. CL, like she always has, is pretty nonchalant about this, not being overly nasty with him like Lune was. She even allows him back in and gives him a chance to earn her trust back. And when Verso asks about the status of their relationship,
we stay here a little longer.
Verso...
What's wrong?
I'm afraid things are different now. Mael can bring Pierre back. I'm sorry.
It's not that she doesn't care about Verso, it's that she cares more about her husband. She even tells him how she would sacrifice him for Pierre in a heartbeat, which I thought was kind of rude when I first heard it, but then I remembered Verso literally sacrificed the entire canvas to save his family. So I think he understands on some level. The last bit of CL trivia that really punched me right in the gut is when you get to the end of her relationship. She tells the story of how she was so consumed by grief after Pierre's death that she attempted to drown herself. She wanted to get as far away from Lumiere as she could. Miraculously, she survived, but she was unaware of her own pregnancy and lost the baby as a result.
But I don't know how to tell him. I lost our baby. She would have been 6.
That was it. That was the moment I shed a tear, and it solidified CL as a truly great character. Speaking of Verso though, what a complex guy. Like I said, I was initially so confused as to why the marketing was so hush-hush for this dude.
Verso is, Verso is no one.
I expected something more mysterious from this character, and there were mysteries that were revealed, like his backstory with his family. Renoir being his father was sort of within the realm of reason. That one didn't surprise me. It didn't explain the immortality thing, but it waived it with, okay, somehow the first expedition is special, it's why Verso can do stuff like this.
We're both Verso.
You are so ridiculous.
Wait, how can your legs talk?
Ah, yes, I'm quite proud of that. Took a lot of training.
Does it? Does it hurt?
No, it doesn't.
But throughout the Monolith dungeon, it's practically told to you in bold text that his mother is the paintress. It's crystal clear that Verso didn't want to follow the same path that his parents laid out for him.
My parents were both artists. Widely respected, very prominent artists. So, there was a great deal of pressure to follow in their path.
Okay, so yeah, this all makes sense. But I'll tell you what I was not predicting, that Verso is actually dead and we've been walking around with a simulated copy of a dead guy created by his grieving mother. Holy shit! This game doesn't go from 0 to 100, it's more like it goes from 70 to 300. Painted Verso becomes an incredibly complex character here. He wants this cycle to end for the sake of his family, but he also knows that ending this whole thing will lead to the end of the existence and the end of every creature inside the canvas. He knows what's best for his family, which is why he kept the secret from the group, knowing that kicking his mother out of the canvas would allow Renoir to destroy it and all of its inhabitants, but he didn't care because that would save his family. He never thought there could be another way.
Eileen wants her son back. Renoir wants you and Eileen back. You want Gustave back. The cycle we needed to break wasn't the gommage. It's your family's cycle of grief.
And honestly, I sympathize with him. Has he been using the other party members to save his family, but ultimately leading them to the end of their own existence? Yes, but it's like CL said.
Save it. I don't need your mea culpa. You did what you felt you had to.
Lune didn't take it nearly as well, but this is how you know you've got a truly remarkable character on your hands. I get why Painted Verso did what he did. I might have done something similar to save my family if given the choice. You feel for both characters here. When Maëlle confronts Verso at the end of her relationship with her asking if he could have saved Gustave, reluctantly, he says yes. He let him die because he wasn't sure if his plan would have worked if he let him live. Yeah. Sacrifices. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I just can't sing the praises for Verso enough, especially in hindsight. Second playthroughs are going to hit differently knowing what we know now.
Losing family is difficult.
I know what you're going to say. You want to offer your condolences. You want to say something comforting. But I don't need it. I've had enough condolences. I've lost so many families now.
At the end of the game, when given the choice between both endings, Verso's is what I would reckon most people will classify as the good ending. It saves everyone involved and allows Verso to finally rest. It's sad, but ultimately optimistic. But there's one character who is not nearly as happy in this timeline. Mael, who we originally thought of as an orphan with an adoptive father/brother who gets suddenly taken away from her, keeps that sweet, determined demeanor up until she turns into a world-hopping paintress who has the power to bring people within its world back to life. I had a feeling Mael was more important, like I said, but my theory started to get more traction as we take visits to the manor throughout the game. There are doors all over the game world that give access to different rooms in the manor. When you find yourself in the manor initially, all the doors are locked, as are all of the mysteries in this place. But as you unlock these doors, you start to paint a picture of the people who used to live here. Then, pulling the curtain back fully, we learn that the Mael we know is nothing but a glamoured version of the Desandre daughter Alicia, a hollow version of a young woman who has nothing in her real life. No friends, no voice to communicate. Her mother and father are literally consumed by the grief of their son's death. Her older sister Clair is rude and demeaning to her, blaming her for things. But after she gets repainted in the canvas, she's given a new lease on everything. A life where she doesn't have to just exist, but a life she can live. Question for you all. Was the fire really what destroyed them as a family? Or were they already pretty messed up long before Verso's death? That's up to the player at the end of the day, but the one thing that is consistent is every member of the Desandre family has their own selfish goals. Aileen couldn't stand to live without the family she remembered before the tragedy, so she created versions of that family and put them in the canvas. Renoir couldn't stand the thought of losing any more of his family, so he jumped into the canvas to bring his wife back to reality. It's why he's so adamant on destroying it so Alicia can't lose herself in it too. Even though he says multiple times, of course he doesn't want to erase the last piece of his dead son's memory. And I believe him when he says that. He recognizes that his family needs to move on from this grief. Clair seems like she's more or less unbothered by the happenings of the family, but I'm sure she is hurting deep down. Verso was the only one who made the least selfish choice, but even then, he admitted to lying about certain things to make sure the canvas could be destroyed. His death in Mael's ending in particular was pretty tear-jerking, a plea from a tormented eternal soul who just wants to die, but his family won't let him go, all because of how it makes them feel. Absolutely f***ing incredibly performed by Ben Starr and Jennifer English.
Unpaint me. Unpaint me.
So...
I don't want this life.
Stop saying that.
I don't want this life. I don't want this life.
I just wanted to live this lifetime together. This lifetime that was stolen from us. Please.
And then, after Verso fades away and Mael is allowed to stay in the canvas, she gets exactly what she wants. Everyone in Lumiere gathers at the concert hall for a rousing show, a concert performed by the new paintress's big brother. Everyone is in attendance. Ciel, her husband, Lune, Gustave, and Sophie sit right next to Mael, who is accompanied by some kid. I've heard it's one of Gustave's apprentices, but I'm not sure. But a hush falls over the crowd as Verso walks on stage to give his performance. A prison for his soul, forced to dance by his sister until her body outside withers away. And that's likely to happen sooner rather than later. As someone who values my family more than what I feel like most people do, I resonated pretty heavy with this story. Everyone in the family thinks that they're doing what's best for the family, but there are consequences that affect everyone no matter what side you take. Now, what ending do I personally think was the true ending? That's the thing. I'm inclined to say it's Verso's ending because everyone is at least safe at the end. The family is reunited, but Alicia is back to being her former self, unable to speak, and in a way, stuck in as much of a shell as Verso was within the canvas. But if we take Mael's ending, then Verso's immortal service is renewed for his sister to live out her wish of a lifetime with her brother, but at the cost of her parents losing another child. I can't say for sure whose side I would choose, but I think that's what makes this such an incredible story. Oh boy, it's certainly an analysis of an RPG because it's over half the video's length and I've only talked about the story and I didn't even cover everything that I probably could have, but I think I've covered enough. Anything else, I'm more than willing to jump down in the comments and talk shop with you guys if you have any more questions or if you guys want to start any more discussions. But getting past that, now I want to talk about the evolution of turn-based battles. I was very intrigued by this game's combat system for the sole reason that from the outside, it seemed to be picking up the mantle left in 2003 by Square Enix and what I see as the last traditional Final Fantasy, X-2. I mentioned in the Final Fantasy XVI video that ship has long since sailed, and fans of the traditional Final Fantasy should accept that the new era of the series has been around for over 2 decades at this point, dude. It's an action game franchise now. It sucks for that to be the case, but there's nothing that we can do about it. But there is a reason the franchise made the pivot. As much as it sucks, general audiences are much more inclined to pick up an action game rather than a turn-based RPG. Thus, it makes sense for Square to realize that and put more resources into making the mainline games progressively action-focused. Same thing with the remake trilogy, which arguably has one of the best hybrid turn-based action combat systems. That is until Expedition 33, because hot damn! Square Enix, take f***ing notes, look at this, and do this. The reveal at the Xbox showcase was so surprising for this very reason. When we saw the realistic setting, we were like, oh look, another realistic action game with a white dude as a protagonist. But then we saw the battle transition and the turn-based setup. Whoa, this changes everything. And then the excitement never stopped after learning this. A little bit of background on me, in case you didn't know, one of my favorite games ever made is Sekiro. I am a parry nut. If there is a parry and a counter mechanic in a game, it becomes my entire personality. And then it turns out that the game director of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a Sekiro speedrunner?
Oh yeah! This is happening!
After I heard that, my brain worms started vibrating. I had no idea this was made by one of my own. A Sekiro-pilled parry head created a turn-based RPG? I have been waiting to jump into this because, yeah, it lived up to the hype and then some. When combat begins, every character has 3 AP to use actions as they see fit. Using the basic attack command will deal physical damage based on the equipped weapon, but also grant the character a point of AP. These points will be spent on each character's skills, which can range from hard-hitting multi-hit combos, buffs to defense and offense, as well as devastating magic attacks. Each character can also spend AP on the free aim feature. During a character's turn, if you hold the left trigger, the character will take aim, and for every shot, 1 AP will be spent. You have to take care when aiming though, as most enemies have weak points that will deal increased damage if they're targeted. Or in the case of certain enemies like these underwater mines, they explode, killing the enemy holding it and dealing splash damage to the other monsters on the field. And pro tip for my PC players, for enemies with the moving weak points, activate free aim with the controller and then grab the mouse. It made it 10 times easier. It felt like I was playing Marvel Rivals. But this is the baseline for the party's offensive capabilities. If you know me though, the creed I want etched onto my tombstone is combat systems are not made by their offensive options, they're made by their defensive options. I feel very strongly about this, and I'm glad that Expedition 33 does too. The biggest selling point of this combat system to me is the interactivity that happens during the enemy's turn. Every enemy has attacks that will have very particular rhythms in which you have to carefully parry these attacks. Some have a singular strike, and if you successfully parry it, the character will perform a damaging counterattack. And then if the enemy performs a combo attack, you have to lock in and parry every single attack in the chain. But if you do, you take 0 damage and clap back with a flashy and hard-hitting move. It's even better when the enemy targets the entire team because every character will parry, and if successful, Expedition 33 as a whole will deliver a huge counterattack. God, it's so sick. That parry window is strict as f though. I was taken aback by how strict the timing is. Despite how wacky some enemy combos are in Sekiro, the parry window is comparatively generous. It's not handed to you, but compared to the Expedition 33 timing, it feels noticeably more unforgiving because of the hang time. The reason it's so much more forgiving in Sekiro is because you can pretty immediately parry again to catch the attack. It's kind of spammable in that way. In Expedition 33 though, if you miss that parry, the characters have a 1-second cooldown before they can attempt a parry again. It can be brutal. If you can't get a parry down, there is a dodge which is far more lenient, but it doesn't reward any bonus damage. In the early game, I rarely used the dodge. It only became a thought in my head when backed into a corner in really tough fights later on. After you parry an attack, you gain a point of AP to use on your next turn. Dodging doesn't have as much of a reward. Enemies can also flash a special danger indicator, meaning that this attack can't be dodged or parried. Pressing the jump button at the right time will have the party leaping over the hazard, and hitting the right trigger after will see the party getting a quick swing in before they hit the ground. From what I felt, the jump is about as generous as the dodge. Definitely less risky than a parry. And finally, Verso will teach the party about gradient counters. These hard-hitting attacks can't be handled any other way besides pressing the right trigger at the right time to send it back. These attacks are over the top as hell. The screen drains of color except for the enemy before striking, and when you hit it, the sound design makes my hair stand on end.
Let's dance.
Surprisingly though, the gradient counter still has a slightly more generous window than the regular parry. It's nice because some of these attacks have some interesting timings, but I would rather this because these attacks can be devastating. But the damage that you give after countering is massive, making the gradient counter super important to stay on top of. Staying on top of your defensive play in general is very important. I would honestly say that learning enemy attack patterns is the most important thing in battles. Blocking or avoiding damage is what is going to keep you alive, but the other key to survival is learning how to best utilize each character's unique mechanics. Let's go down the list. Gustav is closest to your basic knight character, I would say. I spec'd him into damage and vitality with mostly only a few points in defense, but early on I realized that parrying was going to be a big focus for me, so I won't need defense if I'm not going to get hit, and him getting parries off fed into his overcharge. Simply put, Gustav has a move that will become more devastating the more hits he has racked up before he uses it. This is sped up by his parries, and a basic attack will count as 1. The meter caps out at 10, and using Lumiere Assault, a 6-hit combo, puts overcharge over halfway off rip. And if you can manage your party's turns, Gustav also has supportive skills that do things like buff the entire party. This is how Gustav achieves some big damage.
For those who come after.
And using other characters like Mael, the enemies can have their base defense lowered. Every character has status spells, but early on, Mael was who I used to debuff enemies for other characters to hit hard. Her main mechanic revolves around her stances. Each of her moves allows her to swap into one of 3 stances. Defense increases her defense and gives her more opportunities to earn AP. Offensive stance lowers her defense but increases her attack power. And Virtuous is a little trickier to enter but offers triple the attack boost. Being effective with Mael revolves around cycling through her stances. Lune is the closest we get to a mage class. Using her Lumina, she's able to cast your basic elemental magic. These spells hurt and can apply status effects like burn or slow, but the crazy shit happens when you start to understand her stains. So after a spell lands, Lune stores the stain in her weapon. Every cast creates a stain that corresponds with the element of the spell. Her basic fire, Immolation, will grant a fire stain. Each of her skills can be used regardless of what stains she has stored, but if you look under the description of each skill, there will be a unique bonus effect if the stains listed can be consumed. Chaining spells to accumulate and use stains can have some big results. Ciel has her playing cards. Some of her attacks give stacks of Foretell to the enemies. She can have a max of 10, and Foretell will power up her other moves. Her skills are also either a moon skill or a sun skill. If you can use one of each, Ciel will enter Twilight mode. This allows her to increase an enemy's max Foretell stack up to 20 and will give her skills an even larger boost in power. In today's episode of This Game Was Made Specifically For Me, Verso has his perfection meter. The more hits he lands, the more his rank will increase. This includes basic attacks, skills, and even counters. But the only thing is that every time he takes a hit, his rank decreases by a letter grade. It can only go down once per turn, but you have to be on your shit with Verso. And then finally, we have the closest thing to a straight up copy of a Final Fantasy class. In Final Fantasy, there are blue mages, or just blue magic in some games that allow you to learn enemy skills and use them for yourself. Monoko is this game's blue mage. By defeating Nevrons while he is one of the active members of the fight, Monoko will acquire the Nevron's feat. Lune might need to watch out, or at least wear some socks when she's around him.
Don't worry. He's not interested in human fate.
And the bell?
But these enemy skills have Monoko transform into the Nevrons and use the attacks you've been parrying and dodging on other enemies. They all run the gambit of attack types and elemental effects. When I got Monoko, I made it a point to keep him in my party as much as possible to get as many attacks as possible. His bestial wheel will provide different bonuses to moves if it's landed on the right section. Using certain classes of moves will spin the wheel to power up other classes of moves to use on Monoko's next turn. So gathering as many enemy feet as I can gave me more opportunities to gather more skills. I started doing really well in fights. Early on, I kept Verso, Lune, and Mael exclusively in my party. I did use Gustav up until his death, even though I thought his strategy didn't go too deep looking back. I used him to buff the party with Powerful and build up his overcharge mechanic. That was his entire kit. It's kind of what I was talking about when I felt like something was coming before his death. He had reached the end of his mechanical rope. But Lune, on the other hand, that's where things get more exciting. She has several branches to go down, and the stains that will increase the power of the skills found in one branch are usually created by skills of a totally different branch. I know people that went hard into Burn for Lune, a status effect that can be stacked on enemies repeatedly, dealing damage every time their turn starts, stacking it so high that it's essentially like having another turn to hit them. But I was personally more focused on her lightning skills. All of these skills hit multiple times, and one of her early weapons, the Demonerum, was all about lightning and scaled with the luck stat. Luck increases the critical hit chance for attacks, and most lightning spells will strike twice if the hit is critical. So I gave Lune everything critical hit chance related, as well as starting battles with Wildfire, a fire move that hits every enemy and gives me 1 fire stain. This powers up my next lightning move. And whenever I get full 4 stains, I unleash Mayhem, a skill that attacks the enemy with the element of the accumulated stains. It was good to throw it out there whenever I had it built up, but my bread and butter with Lune was throwing the power of Zeus at everything I could. But never say never, because I eventually found a fire weapon for Lune, the Coralim. This weapon applied a burn stack every time a critical hit was made, so using my lightning skills with the astronomically high crit chance, I could get burn built up on enemies quick. And it took me too long to realize how strong Elemental Genesis is. It's one of Lune's last skills and can only be activated if you have one of each stain active, but that's super easy to do thanks to her magic trick skill that throws random elements at an enemy. Either I was lucky or this move is programmed to give you exactly one of each element, because I was eventually nuking shit with Lune. Mael was a little more straightforward for me. I had some trouble in the beginning finding my way to Virtuous Stance, which is where her big damage resides. One of her basic Virtuous pathways is with the skill Swift Stride. If an enemy is burning, Mael will enter Virtuous when that hits. With Lune always opening fights with a fire move, this wasn't a problem. And then from there it was a matter of finding ways to crank the highest damage while making it fall within this window. Because after a turn in these stances, Mael will return to stanceless unless the preceding move states otherwise. It's why her move Florette Fury was great, because it hit hard and kept her in Virtuous afterwards. But its high AP cost will see her having to use a basic attack next turn. I know there was a setup that Mael had which was so absurd that the team had to nerf it, with it being able to deal something like 1 billion damage or something. I wasn't blessed enough to come across anything that game-breaking with Mael. She was strong, but not that strong. It was after she gained access to her Void moves in Act 3 that I started to see the vision. There was one that deals damage based on how many burn stacks the enemy has built up, which made her and Lune best friends. There was Stand Hall, which is what I think people used to make the crazy Mael builds before the nerf, but it still hit pretty damn hard for me. And then there was my personal favorite, Phantom Strike. It hit every enemy a bunch and also gave me a lot of gradient charge. I will explain why that's important in just a minute. Verso was pretty self-explanatory. If I could channel my inner Virgil and be as perfect as possible with this guy, the big damage would follow. Especially when going down his light attack focused branch. His one attack, Perfect Break, deals very high break damage, which is essentially a posture meter in Sekiro terms. After it breaks, it leaves the enemy stunned for their following turn. But if this move breaks an enemy, Verso will immediately shoot to S rank where his real damage numbers reside. After beating one boss, Verso gets a weapon that allows him to gain a second turn if he uses his base attack. Pair that with Pictos that give you base attack damage and multiple hits on base attack, and that's free AP that you can use to absolutely obliterate the enemy on Verso's free next turn. If I can swing it, I just store AP and hit them with big attacks like Steeled Strike. It takes 2 turns to come out, but the damage output is always worth it. Again, as long as I can keep Verso up and untouched, the damage is worth it. Especially if I can coordinate with other characters like Mael to debuff everyone beforehand. If I'm not careful though, he will blow over like a dead leaf. But hey, if I needed someone to fight those duels against the Gestural Merchants, it would take me a few tries, but Verso could get it done super quick. They all had some great synergies, and then I realized, oh wait, I should probably see what all the characters can do. So I started playing more with CL, and she's pretty great. There's really nothing more to CL than her explanation from what I can see. I guarantee you I'm wrong, but I don't think I really cracked her at any point. She was a valuable member of the team. She had her skills that would stack foretell on enemies at different rates, and the goal was always to get as much on the enemies as possible. Whether or not the other teammates needed a heal would dictate whether or not I used Grim Harvest, her one and only heal move that was usually more than enough to heal the party, as it healed more depending on how much foretell was stacked on the enemy. But she had her skills that would hit hard too. Truth be told, CL was kind of hard to keep alive. I feel like for a while she was going down with the slightest breeze. Bless Sandfall for giving us so many items that allow us to reroll characters. They seriously shower you with these items, but I'm not complaining at all because this is them practically begging you to experiment with each character and what they can do. I changed weapons and rerolled her to be more speedy and defensive, so she was able to stay alive longer, but she wasn't my main damage dealer. I did really love her gradient attack though. These are essentially limit breaks in Final Fantasy terms. The more charges you have, the more you can use. Some of them, like Mael's first two, I never bothered because they didn't seem to do as much as her skills, but CL's first gradient attack stacked so much foretell on the enemies, as well as healing her because of the weapon I had equipped. Then we have Minoko, my mid-game win button. There weren't many strategies I really employed with him. The one that I really started to feel good about was the Cultist Blood attack. It sacrifices 90% of Minoko's health to hit every enemy, but on his following turn I use Cultist Slashes, which deals more damage based on how low Minoko's health is. I used that to get a couple 9,999 combos. But the skill that allowed me to basically skip some fights was Glace Earthquakes. This would slam the ground 3 times with earth damage, and if I had Mael use Defenseless on the turn before, then it wasn't unusual for these attacks to deal some quadruple 9s. Towards the end of the game though, Minoko was more of a supplement to the walking warhead that was Mael. If his AP allowed, he would buff the party and then debuff the target enemy. I think I got every enemy attack except one. It kinda bothers me, but I'll live. I got some of the late game Nevrons as attacks, and the Void Beast especially was awesome. It had 3 hits, but if it hit the same monster 3 times, it would do increasing damage. I didn't get as in-depth with build crafting as some people obviously have, but I honestly don't think you have to. For the most part, I found the game to be pretty comfortable. Some battles gave me trouble on the first attempt, even with me being on my P's and Q's using my strategies, I would lose. But after I had learned the moveset and go back in there, I would parry and counter everything. I never had a moment where I found myself stressing about how I was going to realistically beat a boss or enemy. All except for Simon, but we'll get there in a second. I made sure to fight every random encounter I came across, and I never skipped a single one for the entirety of my playthrough until I entered Act 3. Also, side note, I love that this game is traditional, yet still modern. Following in the footsteps of the modern Dragon Quest games, there are no random encounters. You see the enemies on the world map, and you see them in the dungeons, but you have to run up to them to actually initiate the battle, and you can even do an attack to get the first strike. Love that type of stuff. I have heard some people say that the parry system trivializes combat. I did say that mastering your defensive options is the most important aspect of combat, but I don't agree with the parry being the end-all be-all, because that would mean that you can hit every single parry perfectly, which I don't doubt could happen with practice, but at that point, I think the player would deserve to walk all over the game if they put that much effort into learning the systems. You really do have to study enemy animations and sound cues to perfect the movesets, and especially some of the super bosses, you will have some huge combos to internalize. Oh my god. It can be done, but it's disingenuous to say that it trivializes the combat system, because that would imply that the rest of the mechanics and character-specific systems don't matter. It would also imply that the exploration doesn't matter, which is so far from the truth. The time-honored video game tradition of which way is the extra way is present as far in as your second hour in Expedition 33. I made it a point to see which area looked the least important every time I was running through a dungeon, every time I was sent back to a new area on the world map. Some of these are better than others though, I gotta admit. When they asked me to do some platforming, I didn't wince, but I was just kind of There were some instances that were better than others, even kind of fun. But then there were some like this one that was just so tight, I was like, what the f is this, man? There are some climbing handholds and a few grappling hook points that stir up running and jumping everywhere. It did help to break up the monotony of exploration, but it couldn't help but still feel a little one note. The chroma-covered items were one of the more interesting environmental interactions. When you come across these swirling cages, there will be 3 chroma pimples around the surrounding area. Finding and shooting them will unlock this barrier and allow you to get the item. These were my favorites, but all of these methods do a great job of mixing overworld exploration enough and keeping dungeons exciting. And And we can't forget about the gestural beaches. These are mini games that reward mostly cosmetic items from what I recall. I was worried about this one where you have to climb up while these bubbles fall, trying to knock you down. It was easy when you found the pattern, but I was just so scared that this was going to be really annoying. I heard a lot of people struggled with this platforming challenge where you have to parkour up this tower of garbage, but I thought it was fine. It was a little more precise than that cave platforming, but it was fine as long as I waited to press jump until I was right next to a chest-high obstacle. That would have my character cling to the object and climb over it. And the only tricky thing is when the character lands from a big fall and does that little roll, that can be trouble right there. The cosmetics in general were really fun to see. I didn't play dress up as much as some might. I kept everyone in their main outfits until it was time to do side stuff in Act 3, and even then I kept everyone pretty reasonable, except for CL, and I refused to give an explanation.
Coming.
Speaking of that cleanup, I would often find optional bosses before Act 3 that would open up the fight with an authentic Irish hello.
Oh my god!
I had a primal need to get stronger so I could eventually take these guys down, not only for the sake of my brainworms, but many of these extra little side activities had great treasures to hide. There are even opportunities to do side quests for NPCs that reward you with new weapons and cosmetics and pictos. I've mentioned these before, but they're essentially passive buffs that you can equip to each character. There are so many that offer so many different bonuses to the character that you've equipped them to, and winning 4 battles with a picto equipped will see you learning the buff attached as a Lumina, meaning that every character can equip that buff if they have enough Lumina points. The pictos do so many gameplay changing things like augmenting your dodges, giving you health back on a successful parry, applying 2 burn stacks anytime you apply 1. Then once you complete Act 2, you get a picto that allows you to break the 9,999 damage limit. Learning this Lumina is crucial to completing so many of the late game optional boss fights. Act 3 is essentially when you're meant to go around the world map and clean everything up you weren't strong enough to do before. Well, now that everyone can break the damage limit, you can beat these fights. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible, and this is where I would say the game gets truly difficult. The few bosses that I took on before Act 3 were part of this category of encounters that really do just stomp you if you haven't gotten a grasp on dodging and parrying. Like this guy, Scavenger. I had already taken down the 3 elemental sisters by the skin of my teeth, realizing that none of my physical attacks can hit them. I essentially had to rely on nothing but parrying and counterattacking to do damage. Yes! Finally! But sorry, the Scavenger. He absorbs dark damage, so I had to completely reroll CL and Minoko because they are mostly dark damage dealers. He was taking out all of my characters within a hit or two, so I had to get his parry times down pat. It took more than a few attempts to learn his moves like this one-hit kill his lanterns do. Talk about tight timing, that one was... ugh. So in this try, my main team had fell and I used all of my consumables. I did not think I was going to beat him, but in the last phase, he has this attack where he warps in and out and he hits you with an 8-hit combo, and the timing on the second set of hits is ridiculous. In my last stand, I had the epiphany that, oh yeah, the dodge window is way more generous than the parry, so I just dodged the first hit of the second set and it worked. Then I came back, stacked him with Foretell, and won after a big hit. I used CL to beat this boss too. Before, I wasn't putting a dent in this thing. I had grown accustomed to the tough but short combos of the basic enemy types in this dungeon, but then this boss? I was finally able to stack CL's Foretell to 20. During Twilight, the stars aligned and I pulled off some huge damage to almost take this thing out in one turn. And then for beating this boss, I got a new weapon for Verso that stacks a flat 20% damage boost for every turn he doesn't take damage up to 5 times. Plus, Verso starts every battle at rank S now. I just have to play even more Virgil-like than I already did. The only kind of safety net I could give Verso now was the second chance Lumina, which revives a character once per battle after they're knocked out. I admittedly wasn't as perfect as I would have liked, but when I could make it work, I was able to hit for some big numbers. That giant robot in the middle of the ocean that turned my party into a pancake? Yeah, I came back and gave him a much needed beatdown. Afterwards, I'm rewarded with the Cheater Pictos that allows the character to have 2 turns. It might be called Cheater, but I assure you, it's required. There are a few Pictos that are damn near mandatory to stand a chance against the optional fights in Act 3. If you want to hunt down the super bosses tucked away in the recesses of Act 3, you need these big guns. And by big guns, I mean Mael's 3rd gradient skill, Gommage. To my knowledge, this is the single hardest hitting skill in the game. dealing damage numbers in the millions if you can stack it with her virtuous stance and the appropriate buffs and debuffs. The late game encounters really do just revolve around filling up the gradient gauge as quickly as possible. It becomes relatively easy to do, and I'm sure I could have even optimized it further if I gave it some more thought, but things like charging the meter every time burn is applied to an enemy, then equipping every party member with burn chance on their free aim shots, gradient charge every time you hit a counter attack, and then Mael's Phantom Strike gives you 35% of a charge on its own.
Get out of this campus!
But I took down some big ones. The big dragon above the map that keeps giving itself shields was annoying, not because it was hard, but because Mael was the only one that could stay alive. The weapon I ended up leveling up for her steals shields from enemies, so Mael and this dragon were essentially playing patty cake with these shields. Eventually it went down, it just took a second. There are really so many bosses, but the strategies only vary slightly. After I maxed out Lune's luck stat, paired it with the double burn picto, and used the lightning skills that strike twice if they're crits, I was stacking burn like a madman. But that strat and all of my other strats were enough to carry me through most of the content on my initial playthrough, all except the most super of all the super bosses, Simon. I have yet to really make mention to the art direction's obvious Dark Souls Miyazaki vibes. The creatures and bosses have that fallen warrior aesthetic to a lot of them. Not all of them, obviously, but I know I wasn't the only one who thought Pontiff Sullivan when fighting the duelist enemies. But nowhere did I feel this more than when approaching Simon. I mean, it even pulled the endless fall thing into his arena that Dark Souls has pulled so many times before. But then you see this guy, alone in a graveyard of magical swords. You get to him and he pulls out one hell of a Berserk reference. I thought I had done well in beating this guy, but then he gets a whole new phase? No. I'm good. Maybe I'll check back and beat him one day, but for now, I'm okay. Was I taken by surprise with how much I loved Expedition 33? No. You should already know how much a good counter alone can sell me on a game, and when it's also got an incredible battle system filled with tons of customization, ways to push those builds to the test, at least in in-game, and a story that honestly made me think long and hard about how I felt about every character in it, that's how you know you have an incredible experience on your hands. This will probably go down as one of my personal favorite RPGs that I've ever played. I will never forget this journey with these characters, and I wish only the best for Sandfall Interactive from here on out. They have my support similar to how Baldur's Gate 3 convinced me to support anything Larian does in the future. Going back to my Dragon Quest retrospective with Dragon Warrior 2 for the NES it's gonna come with a bit of a shell shock, but I'm excited nevertheless. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. I know that I'm usually the guy you come to for recommendations on action games, and I've kind of been giving a lot of turn-based RPGs attention lately. I haven't forgotten my roots, and I will be getting back to some in-depth action game stuff soon, but in the meantime, if you want to stay up to date with me and everything that we do here, feel free to subscribe here on YouTube, join the Discord to hang out with us on occasion, and if you want access to uncensored and ad-free versions of my videos as well as exclusive videos, I invite you to check out the description for a link to my Patreon. There are several benefits aside from the exclusive video stuff too. Just ask my current $10 patrons, WhiteGhost117 and NikkiCoon99. They'll vouch for me. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by and have a great day.